We are, by our very nature, wanderers. Eternally restless, always seeking greener pastures. We explore and settle even the harshest environments and vigorously defend these new homes with our lives. But we can't do that with determination alone. In the universe of Star Citizen, one company has risen through the hopes of these very pioneers, Drake Interplanetary. For almost a century, they've striven to help humanity in this never-ending endeavor and put the power to prosper in the hands of the common person. My name is Paul Shelley, and welcome to TheAstroHistorian. This is a channel dedicated to exploring and explaining the lore of sci-fi and space universes and discussing their impact. Today we'll be talking about the universe of Star Citizen, specifically the complete history of the rise to fame of one of the most contentious and beloved manufacturers of the UEE, Drake Interplanetary. To begin our look into this notorious manufacturer, we need to set the context of its creation. The UEE of the mid-29th century was a dangerous and uncertain era. The UEE had greatly declined since the Anti-Mezzer Revolution, with less funding to the military alongside a much less effective navy. Its ships often centuries past their best use. This meant that more and more systems found themselves on their own to deal with outlaws, pirates, and Vanduul raids. For the more populated and wealthy systems, this wasn't much of an issue. But for the systems on the frontier, this was disastrous. Knowing that if the UEE did nothing to stem the crime wave that was erupting on the more distant colonies, the UEE Navy came up with a unique idea. They would place what they called home defense squadrons on these distant worlds, likely militia with some military advisory support. These squadrons would be trained and equipped by the UEE Navy, but operate outside of their command structure, likely relying on merchant marines to resupply and support them rather than the already stretched logistical structure of the Navy. This was essential since the collapse of the Mezzers had created what I've dubbed the cargo crisis of the 29th century, where most of the civilian manufacturers of transport craft disappeared after the revolution due to being charged with crimes against humanity, or its leadership and staff disappearing to avoid said trials for their close connections to the Mezzer dictatorship. This meant that the Navy could not feasibly support these squadrons like a normal frontline squadron. To go along with this plan, they needed a ship that would be able to support these squadrons effectively, while also being low cost, configurable with civilian modular components, and could be produced rapidly. To make this ship, the Navy created the Volksjager, or People's Fighter project, in 2845. There were two notable entries into this project: the embattled but civilian shifting Aegis Dynamics, and a team led by a young Terran engineer named Jan Dredge. Aegis would enter their Wildcat fighter design, likely a modification of the venerable Gladius platform, as it shares the same original production name as the Gladius. The Dredge team created what they called the AS-1 Cutlass, an all-new ship designed for exactly what the UEE was asking for in mind. The AS-1 Cutlass comes in at a length of 37.5 meters, a width of 26.5 meters, and a height of 11.5 meters. This makes it significantly larger than most light and medium fighters, even today. It is about the same size as the more complicated and expensive to maintain, but rugged, Aegis Vanguard, whose modular interior system may have been the inspiration to the Cutlass designers. However, the AS-1 lacks the firepower of a heavy fighter, with 4 pilot-controlled Size 3 gun hardpoints, a manned turret which can hold a pair of Size 3 guns, and missile racks that can hold 8 Size 3 and 16 Size 2 missiles. It is more in line with the F-7A Hornet in terms of combat ability, so the reason for its size wasn't related to its weapons capabilities, but entirely unique to the purpose of the ship: frontier defense. You see, most of the ship is simply cargo space. The AS-1 has the capacity of carrying up to 46 SCU of cargo. This meant that it can carry everything from supplies to a small vehicle. It also has a spacious crew area, which includes a pair of beds, a small kitchenette, 2 storage lockers, and 4 fully functional gun racks. These features make the ship easily capable of long-range patrol without logistical support. Add to this its impressive quantum and hydrogen tank capabilities, you might start to see that this isn't just a fighter, it's an everything ship. Just enough utility and teeth to reduce the number of ships required to operate in such remote and hazardous environments. Exactly what the defenders of the frontier needed in a ship. Additionally, the ship is notoriously easy to gain entry to. Apart from its rear ramp, the ship also has a pair of large side doors, ideal for when you need to EVA to recover cargo, salvaging, or rescue operations. To assist in recovery-type missions, the ship had a conveniently placed hardpoint at the rear which holds a Size 1 tractor beam. The ship performed admirably when tested, and the engineers and designers of the ship were proud of their accomplishment. However, the Navy was not. They passed over the AS-1 Cutlass for the Aegis Wildcat, a move which would radically alter the state of ship manufacturing for a century to come. Despite this snub, the Cutlass team were sure that they had a market for this ship. The first people they turned to sell the Cutlass to were private militia groups. UE allows, and some would say encourages, anyone, anywhere to own armed spacecraft. Due to the bleak realities of life outside the core systems, this was far more affordable for the UEE to allow these militia groups, like the famed Bremen Defense Force, to take the place of the Navy and sometimes advocacy personnel. The Cutlass team's plan was that private squadrons in more distant areas of the galaxy would welcome a low-cost spacecraft solution. Regions specifically classified as high insurance risks, the team reasoned, would especially welcome an easier way to replenish lost spacecraft. And they were right. These frontier militia forces saw the Cutlass for what it was, a tool to ensure their family's safety and survival. Thus, sales were phenomenal. Within 9 months, the Cutlass team had opened 6 off-world factories and had licensed dealerships in 9 systems. Within a year, this small team went from their hopes being crushed by the bureaucracy of the UEE military, seen at the time as a corrupt and often useless branch of the government, to successful rebel entrepreneurs that ensured the livelihoods of the common person were protected and thriving. They had become outlaw engineers, snubbing their nose at the ordered society of the core systems and embracing the rugged and can-do attitude of the frontier. However, the reality was far more different than the public imagination. Shortly after this successful release, the team decided that they needed to incorporate in order to continue their growth. Thus, they founded Drake Interplanetary. Lead designer Jan Dredge became CEO, with a 7-member board consisting largely of aerospace engineers who had worked on the project. The name Drake was not the surname of anyone involved in the project, or even had any particularly close meaning like many of the companies founded in the 28th and 29th centuries. Instead, it was selected as an acceptably smooth-sounding name, chosen specifically in the hopes that it would make their spacecraft more appealing. This was the first in a series of money-over-all decisions that would quickly come to define the company. A later decision was also telling. Rather than expand into the UEE's traditional homeworlds like Earth or Terra, Drake would lean into its own outlaw reputation, while also take advantage of the UEE Navy's biggest failure, when Drake based themselves in the economically embattled system of Magnus, with both corporate governance and key factories on Berea, Magnus II. You see, the Magnus system has become the poster child of failed military governance. Shortly after it was discovered, it was earmarked for the UEE military. Magnus's distance from well-traveled space, plus the availability of heavy materials, and the anticipated ease of terraforming Magnus II, resulted in a military-commissioned closed terraforming starting in 2533. By the late 26th century, Magnus had become a large-scale naval base and the source of a great deal of ship construction. This lasted approximately 50 years, until budget cutbacks and desire to focus on operations in other systems, like Killian, led to the large-scale abandonment of Magnus. The result was an eerie, depopulated ghost world, with declining structures full of refining and shipbuilding equipment, considered too expensive to move elsewhere. During this period, the system's population declined to less than 30,000, most of whom had no legal right to their encampments. In 2751, the original military classification for the Magnus system expired, and other colonists were technically allowed to move in. Magnus's colonials were a ragtag group of outbackers, claim jumpers, and an assortment of similar, less savory types, trying to escape their reputations on the core worlds. The result was a system with a reputation for a wild, anything-goes atmosphere, where humans could live along the margins of the law. It has become the wild frontier, despite being a core world, due to the complete failure of the military and the government in giving support to the people of Magnus. Thus, Drake deciding to call the system home in 2845 was a deliberate choice, as a statement of antagonism towards the UEE, and building on their outlaw reputation. However, there is another reason, as there almost always is with Drake. You see, the UEE dry docks and other military-built infrastructure was still there, unclaimed and unwanted due to the wild nature of the system. Drake knew they could effectively get a discount on valuable infrastructure, which others were too frightened to attempt to seize. This gave them an enormous head start early in their existence, as they were able to refurbish these old facilities and thus increase production much faster than anyone in the industry anticipated. By 2846, the company had quadrupled again. By the 2850s, they were the fifth largest spacecraft manufacturer concern and couldn't license subsystems manufacturers quickly enough. The company was lauded as a massive business success, credited in financial magazines as the little engine that could. Finally, a competitor that would change how companies like Roberts Space Industries and Musashi Industrial ran their businesses. From the numbers alone, it looked like everyone would be flying a Cutlass in the 2860s. There was one issue with this success, however. The same features that made the AS-1 Cutlass so popular with frontier militia made it popular with criminals. Quickly, Drake earned the undesired reputation as a manufacturer of spacecraft favored by outlaws and pirates. The company initially addressed these concerns with the launch of the Cutlass Blue in 2860. The Blue is a modification of the base Cutlass, with non-lethal weapons designed to appeal to law enforcement agencies. The Cutlass Blue, also known as the DCB-2, is a modification of the AS-1, which was subsequently renamed the Cutlass Black, or DCB-1. As such, it has the same dimensions as the original, though with heavily modified cockpit and customized interior. These modifications include a fully integrated quantum dampener, which can instantly prevent nearby ships from activating or spooling their quantum drives, custom Durasteel holding cells that can safely restrain and transport up to 12 detainees at a time, and hull-mounted emergency vehicle lighting that flashes red and blue during pursuits and emergency situations. While the launch of the Blue failed to stifle all criticism, it did manage to successfully generate reasonable doubt among consumers and provide Drake's defenders sufficient ammunition to engage detractors. Though it was clear to CEO Jan Dredge that in order to keep the already antagonistic eyes of the UEE government off of them, they would need to pivot away from combat-focused ships for some time. She was looking towards the future, and in her mind, the future for spaceships was in hauling. The success of the RSI constellation Taurus, after a series of incidents with Hull series ships in the 2830s, which grounded the entire lineup, proved that there was a market for cargo vessels with internal storage. Although the Cutlass enjoyed some success in commercial hauling, it is more known for its combat abilities. Dredge knew that they could take the same design principles of the Cutlass and apply it to something much bigger. To capitalize on a gap left in the market for large internal cargo ships, she created the Caterpillar. Coming in at a length of 111.5 meters, a width of 39.5 meters, and a height of 13.4 meters, The ship is extremely long, with most of that space being dedicated to cargo modules. The vessel's cargo is divided into 4 compartments, each with elevators on both sides for independent loading and unloading. The forward cargo bay provides extra storage for open canopy vehicles, with some early models featuring an air shield for pallet transfer and vehicle deployment without decompression. It also includes a manned turret, cargo lift, and navigation sensors. To assist in its main operation, the ship also has several dedicated tractor beam operators. A tractor beam station consists of a terminal that allows for the ship to safely guide debris and even errant cargo directly into the side access doors of the cargo modules. Finally, one of the most unique features of the ship is its command module. The Caterpillar's cockpit can act as a ship that can detach from the primary hull and operate independently, transporting multiple Caterpillar hulls or serving as an emergency escape vehicle. Though it seems that later versions lost the ability to redock with the main hull and are now exclusively escape vehicles. The Caterpillar prototype was initially unveiled at the 2871 Intergalactic Aerospace Expo. The ship received a lot of criticism for its old design. Then negativity almost threatened the whole project. It wasn't until reports of the Caterpillar spread through the Empire that the tide began to turn. You see, people were floored by 2 things: the ability to mix and match ship modules, and the price. The ship was shockingly affordable to even the smallest cargo outfits, allowing for pressurized internal storage with the option to swap out cargo for other dedicated modules if needed. The ship wasn't just a cargo hauler, but, just like the Cutlass, a valuable utility ship for the everyman. Despite the success of the Caterpillar, the darker side of Drake's reputation with Outlaws was brought into the mainstream once more, following the release of the 2875 documentary Bent Cutlass, that claimed that Drake had knowingly ignored background check flags when selling ships. The documentary detailed an incident when 12 Cutlasses were sold to an intermediary, who later transferred them to an outlaw organization for use in a raid that left 122 people dead on an orbital outpost. Facing renewed criticism, the company decided to attempt to repeat their past successes, introducing what executives termed an infallible Cutlass variant, what would become known as the Cutlass Red. As with the Cutlass Blue, Drake invested a great deal in developing the Red as a bespoke spacecraft. However cynical the inspiration behind the ship's development, the team actually charged with making the project a reality was dedicated to building a spaceborne ambulance that would improve and extend the current standard of care. Like the Blue, the Red would have its own assembly line, producing a significantly altered fuselage, along with a completely different array of weaponry. The idea of turning a militaristic spacecraft into a hospital support ship greatly appealed to the war-weary Drake development team, and slots on the Cutlass Red program were highly sought after. Early on, designers identified that the Cutlass Red could combine 2 previously unrelated roles: ambulance-style supported patient transport and search and rescue. The latter role, previously the domain of military-sponsored heavy equipment like the RSI Apollo series, was becoming increasingly necessary, as the technology to make survival in a space wreck or other catastrophe was improving greatly across the latter half of the 29th century. With more and more crews able to survive the destruction of their spacecraft, and a corresponding increase in space combat occurring on the edges of the Empire, the Cutlass Red was seen as a great opportunity to not only sell well, but also make a positive impact on the verse. Drake assigned a full development team to each role and developed a mediating process for interfacing the 2 roles into a single ship. Using the Cutlass Blue as the basis for the hull of the Red, each group was ordered and budgeted to develop a single keystone innovation that would help the Red stand apart on a professional level. The ambulance team opted to partner with the up-and-coming medical manufacturer Bioticorp to be the first ship to install their new auto-dock medical bed that would fit into the extended rear cabin. The search and rescue team decided to focus on software, assembling an electronics subdivision to develop the now familiar Nav-E7 long-range scanner system. The Nav-E7 would give the Red a unique edge in identifying and safely maneuvering around patients in three-dimensional space, managing to advance scanner clarity 23% from the industry standard using only available components. Both role-specific projects proceeded extremely well, and, because they focused on building out different areas of the ship, needed little mediation when adapted to the final hull design. In all, conversion of the Cutlass Blue into the Cutlass Red proof of concept took only 11 months, with a fully constructed Red production prototype flying its first round of space trials in September 2876. The Cutlass Red's road to acceptance was rockier than the Blue's, though, as the initial marketing campaign fell comparatively flat. Drake enlisted actor Don Shadow, then starring as Dr. W. Robin Simpkins on the top-rated Spectrum drama Situation? Emergency, as the spacecraft's official spokesperson. In an uncharacteristic series of advertisements, Shadow addressed the audience directly and invited them to sit down with him for a, quote, very serious conversation, unquote, in which he extolled the new Cutlass model's virtues. Quote, ask yourself, do you want to put your life in the hands of an inferior scanner array? Unquote. He then informed viewers that they could request prepared correspondence to petition their local emergency services organization to purchase the spacecraft. The ads did not feature the ship itself and were widely panned as disingenuous by audiences. Aerospace analysts and mainstream comedians alike had a field day with the Cutlass Red before it had even taken flight. Then, in another example of Drake's extraordinary luck, laughter turned to applause within days of the Cutlass Red's first sail. In spite of the failed marketing campaign and overall negative perception of the project, Drake opted to continue with the planned launch in April 2877, believing that the investment could easily be made up due to the Cutlass Red's practical superiority in its role. With little event surrounding the initial release, first-month sales were limited. Then, Galactic events shifted unexpectedly in Drake's favor when a cruise liner collided with a customs way station in the Corel system, penetrating both ships' hulls and setting off a case of improperly stored explosives aboard the station that caused significant further damage. Dozens were killed immediately, and hundreds were left stranded. The ensuing explosion destroyed the station's vacuum hangars, emergency spacecraft, and medical supplies, forcing emergency services on low to put together a makeshift response themselves. The centerpiece of that response became a flight of 36 brand new Cutlass Red spacecraft that had just arrived for sale. Local forces deputized the ships and crewed them with anyone available to help. The familiar Cutlass controls allowed local pilots to make easy use of the Reds during the emergency. The situation was tailor-made for Spectrum stories, with the force of newly painted bright red Cutlasses riding to the rescue and ultimately stabilizing and transporting back and forth dozens of patients who would have otherwise been lost. Drake's marketing knew to capitalize on the situation, ensuring that footage of the rescue appeared wherever possible. Gone immediately were the concerns the Cutlass Red was a cynical public relations ploy, replaced with the understanding that it truly was the next evolution of medical support spacecraft. So rapid and so significant was the Cutlass Red's turn to favor that actor Shadow credited the spacecraft as part of the reason for his move from Spectrum series to successful film roles. Following the Corel Customs rescue, sales of the Cutlass Red doubled month over month for 2 years. Drake was forced to move from a single production line to a dedicated factory, building only Cutlass Reds. Even more important has been the long-term impact of the Cutlass Ambulance concept on both aerospace design and emergency services. While the initial metrics for the Red were based only on the need to use a similar interior layout to the existing Blue, its rise in importance has led to countless third-party adaptations, including specialized medical components and massive designs. The bed and work area design into the Cutlass Red has become an industry standard unit that has gone on to define everything from loading docks to scanner mounts on dozens of different manufacturers' spacecraft. Inside the company, there was both a palpable sense of relief and a true sense that the Cutlass team had done something important. The team at Drake wasn't done with their advances in non-combat craft, however. With 2 ships released under their brand, Drake was starting to think of not just single one-off ships, but a whole self-supporting array of vessels, allowing for a Drake ship for every situation someone might need. With that in mind, their first step into this field was an unusual one, possibly the first commercially available anti-gravity vehicle of the UEE, the Dragonfly. Released in 2882, the Drake Dragonfly comes in at 7 meters long, 2.5 meters wide, and 2 meters tall, supporting a pilot and rear-facing passenger seat. This fast Gravlev bike was built to act as a scout for industrial and militia operations, and specifically to be designed to fit in both the Cutlass Black and the Caterpillar, effectively extending their ground operational range. The true genius of this design was the work done by the same electronics team that worked on the Cutlass Red Navi 7. They built a brand new bespoke ground interface to allow for the Gravlev bike to function properly, likely being the first to build such a system. The success of the Dragonfly is best understood when one of the first versions was purchased by a colonist on Oya 3, a planet with a joint Xi'an and human colonization. This colonist came to visit their Xi'an neighbors with their new Dragonfly. Impressed with what they saw, the Xi'an of Oya 3 quickly purchased Dragonflies of their own, finding them immensely enjoyable to operate. You see, despite having mastered the art of anti-gravity in ways humanity can't even dream of, the Xi'an had never imagined the idea of a Gravlev bike. This interaction led to the creation of the now famous Nox by Eopoa, a rare example of human ingenuity inspiring an alien design. In 2884, the Vanduul would return on the scene in a big way, with their sudden invasion of the Caliban system. The UEE attempted to keep back the invasion for almost a month before giving up and effectively abandoning the system to the alien invasion. This corresponded with increased aggression along the border between human and Vanduul space, causing more anxiety amongst those living on the frontier. You see, this was the first major incursion after the fall of the Mezzers, and it proved that the Navy didn't seem up to task of protecting the vulnerable systems. Add to this, any attempt to bolster the border with a Vanduul would pull forces away from other outlaw-stricken systems. Either way, it would be the frontier that was going to bear the burden of the mistakes and underperformance of the UEE. So in 2887, Drake would answer these concerns, while they continued their planned mandate to create a full family of complementary vehicles, by returning to building their first pure combat ship since the Cutlass Blue, the Buccaneer. Coming in at a length of 15.25 meters, a width of 16.75 meters, and a height of 5.5 meters, the Buccaneer is a purebred fighter. Technically a medium interceptor, this ship was designed with 2 major goals: get as many guns as possible on its frame, and make it as fast as possible. The ship lacks in maneuverability, but its straight-line speed makes it one of the fastest fighters on the market, able to keep up with some pure racing vessels. It also has an insane amount of firepower for a ship of its compact size, sporting 2 size 3 missile hardpoints, 2 size 1 weapon hardpoints on the wingtips, 2 size 3 weapon hardpoints under the wing near the fuselage, and a single size 4 weapon hardpoint located at its centerline on the top of the ship. All of this was built into the same simple yet reliable design style that had become the hallmark of the Drake design. It was almost tailor-made to answer the concerns of those vulnerable systems, either to Vanduul invasion or rise in outlaw violence. Drake leaned into this, continuing their rebel persona by calling out the UEE for its failures and advertising to those most vulnerable systems that the Buccaneer was the solution to their problems, not bloated government corruption. It was a tactic that worked wonders, with the Buccaneer becoming a common sight on the frontier. On the 9th of August 2895, an incident would take place. The Terra-flagged whole-sea freighter, Empire Slipper, suffered what was later determined to be an unlikely cascade of system failures, which resulted in the bridge terminals receiving a completely incorrect set of navigation overlays. The error caused the Slipper's navigation officer to chart a course into a dense asteroid belt, with a close proximity to the danger zone of a red giant's corona. A debris strike subsequently disabled the aging freighter's shield generators, and unfortunately delivered a dose of fatal radiation to the crew. Empire Slipper was left adrift, its specific location unknown. As the freighter was known to be carrying a wealth of precious metals and a consignment of rare artwork, intense media interest and massive search and rescue operations followed. After 8 months of searches, a UEN picket ship identified the wreckage of the Slipper adrift in an irradiated debris field, putting an end to the conspiracy theories that the freighter had been hijacked. However, it quickly became clear that the region was practically inaccessible to any dedicated salvage ship with enough protection to survive the operation. MISC, the transport's builder, offered a 10 million credit bounty to anyone capable of recovering the black box data recorder in an effort to explain what happened. Unexpectedly, upstart space manufacturer Drake Interplanetary came to the rescue. Seeking both the bounty and the salvage rights to the Slipper's cargo, an elite team convened on Berea to create a makeshift spacecraft capable of solving this particular problem. The basis for this one-off construction was an old, existing AS-1 Cutlass prototype, the Vertical Landing Test 3, or VLT-3. With all testing equipment removed, VLT-3 quickly became a specialized platform intended to reach the Empire Slipper and recover its cargo. Heavy shield generators replaced much of the prototype's ship's standard cargo capacity, and a pair of versatile remote manipulator arms were bolted onto the prow. The result was something unlike any other spacecraft currently flying, an over-shield, underpowered amalgamation that was small enough to navigate to the debris field while keeping its crew of 2 safe. What's more, VLT-3 could engage in the necessary salvage operations using its external arms without requiring EVA, which was made impossible by the amount of radiation involved. 14 months after the Empire Slipper disappeared, Drake's test crew began salvage operations from a hastily established modular space station positioned just outside the danger zone. Over the course of 36 perilous expeditions, VLT-3 repeatedly entered the debris field and carefully removed the Slipper's flight recorders, and then, one by one, the valuable cargo containers. Drake claimed and received salvage rights for the valuable cargo, and promptly delivered the recovered flight recorders to MISC. However, the promised 10 million credits did not materialize, as Drake executives were ultimately taken to court over the bounty when it was discovered that they had covertly opened and copied the flight data aboard a runner ship before passing it along. The success of VLT-3's mission wasn't only beneficial to Drake's bottom line. Public fascination with the lost freighter gave the company's recovery mission significant airplay, and was seen as a positive reprieve for the corporation, which was still battling accusations of profiting from piracy. For a time, Drake was seen as a positive, if rough, force, just as the small personal spacecraft market was beginning to heat up. To play off this success, the company sent VLT-3, its paint seared off and hull covered with micrometeoroid impacts, on a 9-system PR tour to be displayed at aerospace shows and museum exhibits. Excitement over the feat faded, and Drake soon found itself once again mired in controversy. The VLT-3 was put back into storage just as the corporation was again accused of supporting piracy following the coordinated destruction of a MISC Hull D by 4 unmarked Cutlasses. The company seemed to have little interest in the formal development of a salvage ship and instead moved to focus onto the Caterpillar command ship concept, one that we have yet to see. The ultimate mark of Drake's success in the 29th century occurred the same year as the incident with the Empire Slipper and the VLT-3, when the United Empire of Earth purchased an order of 300 Cutlass Reds for use as fleet support. Though a minor order in the scheme of things, the idea that the same UEE that once turned down the Cutlass Black and forced Drake to, quote, go their own way, unquote, would purchase Cutlass Reds directly was seen as an indication that Drake was succeeding in spite of the roadblocks that had been tossed in front of them. The Navy has continued to buy small numbers of Cutlasses in the years since, outfitting many planet-side military hospitals with the ships in an attempt to maintain the same standard as civilian agencies. They have, as of yet, refused to contract hardened militarized versions for frontline service, favoring the larger and more expensive RSI Apollo instead. By the end of the 29th century, Drake was living high on their achievements. They had gone from a scrappy startup to one of the largest ship manufacturers in the UEE. Though not without their controversy, their contributions to society seemed to vastly outweigh their shady actions in pursuit of monetary goals. Heading into the 30th century with their heads held high and their wallets filled with credits, Drake would mostly coast on their achievements from the previous century, steadily increasing their sales of the new suite of ships. However, as a new century began, a new crime wave, often aided by the use of Drake ships, was in full swing. As a result, there was a call for a new generation of data runners, who were particularly vulnerable to being attacked for their precious cargo, with data being often as important, if not more important, than commodities or credits. You see, as there is no faster-than-light communications in the UEE, data is transferred between star systems through comm relays. This system was designed to relay encrypted messages between various relay stations in a system. When those messages arrived at a jump point, they'd be uploaded to a probe and then be sent through the jump point, dock with a station on the other side, and then the messages could continue to be transmitted. Since the system was slow, many companies and individuals sent their messages instead by data running ships, which would upload their data into their own servers before traveling directly to the location to hand off the data. However, most of the ships that specialized in these operations were expensive to buy, expensive to maintain, or both. Thus, data from the frontier to the core systems was often difficult, with little to no infrastructure to transmit these messages. That was where Drake stepped in. In 2913, Drake set about solving both the issue of lack of infrastructure and the expense of infrarunning by combining the two into a single package, the Drake Herald. Coming in at 24.75 meters long, 12.5 meters wide, and 9 meters tall, the ship has been described as an engine with servers, an antenna, and a seat strapped to it. Its powerful central engine allows for high-speed transit, while also generating the power needed for effective data encryption and containment. With advanced encryption software and armored computer core developed by the same in-house team that developed the Nav E7, the Herald is unique among personal spacecraft in that it is designed to be easily cleaned when in danger of capture. With quick loading access ports, the data storage pods can also be detached from the ship for delivery or emergency. The SATA M6A1 high-power broadcast array allows long-range data transmission for both communication and emergency purposes, effectively allowing it to become an ad hoc relay station. It even has advanced rated EMP shielding and backup power systems to avoid total power loss in an EMP blast. All of this makes the ship fast, survivable, and at a price that is affordable compared to its competitors. Needless to say, the Herald quickly became another staple of the frontier. Adding to its favorability, its speed is almost exactly the same as the Buccaneer, allowing for the synergy of ships that Drake had been trying to make. Thus, it isn't an uncommon sight to see a flight of Buccaneers escorting a Herald through rough areas of space to deliver everything from digital letters to sensitive ledgers. As the 30th century continued, Drake decided to once more innovate on their designs, aiming at an untapped market which, up to that point, had been dominated by the RSI Aurora, the beginner ship market. Seeing an opportunity to make a ship with all of the style and affordability of maintenance that became synonymous with Drake, in 2920 they set about to create their own starter vessel, the Cutter. The Cutter has a length of 20 meters, a width of 16 meters, and a height of 6 meters. It boasts a cargo capacity of 4 SCU and is equipped with ample power to tackle just about any challenge. With its classic, rugged, and versatile design, the Cutter is designed to be flexible, versatile, tough, and user-friendly, even supporting a minimal yet comfortable living quarters. What really makes the ship stand out amongst the competition is its cargo bay and its fuel capacity. While having less cargo capacity than the standard Aurora, the Cutter's cargo is internal and large enough to comfortably carry a small land vehicle, thus extending the range and flexibility to any starting pilots looking to get away. It aids those getaways with its fuel capacity, with over double the quantum fuel capacity of the Aurora and almost 5 times the Aurora's hydrogen capacity. This also meant that the ship was slightly more expensive than the Aurora, though that didn't seem to discourage many on the frontier from buying the ship, as it allowed for much more versatility and being easier to repair than its competition in the harsh realities of frontier life. In 2932, an Aegis Dynamics reclaimer, the General Dogsbody, made history with the single most profitable salvage mission in human history, when it discovered and recovered a failed 22nd century colony ship adrift in deep space. The ship's crew became millionaires and minor celebrities overnight, and the event prompted much greater interest in the previously uncelebrated task of space salvage. As interest in salvage boomed and crews began pooling money to purchase their own reclaimer platforms, Drake executives realized they already had a more appealing option in their back pocket. A team of aerospace engineers led by Drake's in-house designer, Sod Perkins, began work on developing the VLT-3 concept into a standalone salvage craft. While the new design would be built from the ground up and wouldn't need a heavy shielding of the original, the overall layout and functionality would remain surprisingly similar to the prototype. The early manipulator arms were replaced with what Drake has ultimately called Rippers, standalone salvage booms supported by lariat tractor beams and atomium scrapper rig. These booms would allow for the craft, soon named the Vulture, to identify, move, and cut space salvage, and then store it in the ship's rear bay. Like the VLT-3, the production Vulture was oriented around shipboard controls rather than EVA support. The crew capacity was reduced from 2 to 1, reinforcing the idea that a single pilot could operate a Vulture, and potentially make their fortune the same way the Dogsbody crew had. A small rear living section would allow for solo operator to endure long voyages, as salvage sites were rarely close to well-traveled space lanes. Finally, the Vulture would feature maneuvering thrusters and an overhead shield generator to enable it to make careful movements, not possible with larger ships like the Reclaimer. Drake premiered the Vulture in 2938, with marketing that called back to the success of the VLT-3, including stylizing the ship's name as the VULTUR-3, or Vulture with the VLT capitalized and a 3 at the end instead of an E. Public interest in salvage and personal fortune-seeking continued, and orders quickly outpaced production capacity at Berea. Within 8 months, Drake was forced to open 2 remote factories to meet demand. While the company was roundly accused of overpromising inexperienced captains the chance at incredible profits by competing manufacturers, Vultures immediately found success with the discovery of several high-profile hulls. These included a Genesis Starliner long thought to be destroyed, and 2 Hull A's that had collided and spun away from their planned routes in an unexpected manner. These stories were major news and prompted continued interest in the Vulture. In 2941, Drake launched the first updated model of the Vulture. While the first civilian release had been completely unarmed, the 2941 model had a pair of Size 1 weapon mounts, which appealed to pilots who would be flying the ship in unsafe and unexplored areas of the galaxy. In 2943, the United Empire of Earth Navy requisitioned 300 Vultures for battlefield support operations. The military versions weren't hardened and didn't feature additional weapons, as they were never intended for use in combat. Delivery of these ships began the following year, where they immediately saw service with the fleet support arm, clearing destroyed spacecraft in the wake of an ever-increasing battles with the Van Duel. Drake has continued to develop the government version of the Vulture, as expectation is large-scale naval battles will only increase in frequency and fervor in the years to come. And the most recent civilian update was made for the 2949 model, with the launch of the now standard extended cab, which ups internal cargo capacity from 8 to 12 SCU. Drake currently offers a low-cost dealer upgrade for early Vultures to convert them to roughly the same capacity. A similar process has been made available for adding weapon mounts to the initial 2938 version. By the 2940s, the Dragonfly had become a staple of popular culture, with Drake even doing a tie-in promotion with the popular Star Kitten brand. The Star Kitten is an animated series created by animation auteur Gendy Kuzo First. It was first premiered in 2932 and immediately warmed the hearts of citizens of all ages. Sally is the star of the Star Kitten lineup. She loves speed racing across the verse with her friends. Doesn't matter who wins or loses, to Sally, all that matters is fun and friendship. Drake would make the Star Kitten-themed bike in collaboration with the cartoon, with its design inspired by Sally. It would launch in 2947 to commemorate the 15th anniversary of her character. This same year, Drake was hit with another setback to its reputation. In an undercover job interview, the company's CEO Jan Dredge was recorded making a controversial statement about selling the Cutlass Black to known piracy groups. After which, family members of piracy victims expressed their outrage by calling for a ban on the Drake Cutlass. On April 6, 2947, Drake Interplanetary released a press statement in which they apologized for the comments made by Jan Dredge and were announcing that she is retiring as CEO of the company to spend more time with her family. Her son, John Dredge, would fulfill her duties as acting CEO until a replacement could be found. And in early 2948, that replacement was found. Drake called a press conference in Odessa to introduce Andon Arden as the new CEO. Arden has led several companies through transitions, often as an interim CEO, which gave him a reputation as a fixer. As last CEO of Waldval Aerospace, a small specialty ship manufacturer that was struggling, Andon Arden sold off all the patents and intellectual property of the company until it was eventually absorbed by ArtCorp and dissolved. Controversially, it is claimed that the remaining board members, including Arden, received a healthy payout, while the other employees were terminated with nothing, though he has claimed that he did everything he could to avoid that situation. In his first act as CEO, Arden condemned the use of Drake's ships by outlaws and instituted a policy that all sales associates attend a mandatory training session every year that reviews their company policy, alongside the empire-wide law. In this statement, he also outlined his vision for the future of the company. He believed that Drake has a knack for creating affordable and durable ships, yet it's hardworking men and women that crisscross the empire flying with these ships that were his main concern. He said that, quote, "Without them, we're just pushing metal," unquote. Arden stated that he wanted to make Drake the company for the people, making reliable, affordable, and empowering ships, highlighting the Vulture as the direction he wanted to take the company towards. His vision for Drake was less focused on combat and more focused on support, with his first true act being the announcement of the most ambitious vehicle Drake has ever manufactured, the Kraken. Coming in at an astounding 270 meters long, 140 meters wide, and 64 meters tall, the Kraken is a multi-role carrier designed with the average person in mind. With its massive 3,792 SEU of cargo capacity, twin all-purpose hangar bays, ample living accommodations, and even an internal tram, the ship is more like a mobile space station than a pure carrier. However, it still has some serious bite, with its 6 landing pads, 4 small and 2 mediums, along with its 5-man turrets and 4 remote turrets. It even comes standard with dedicated Dragonfly Bay, capable of launching any small hover vehicle. While the Kraken was impressive on its own, Drake didn't stop there. They approached a well-known ship customizer with their plans for the Kraken, one who would change the trajectory of the ship forever: Cousin Crow. The story of Cousin Crow was the main reason why Drake would make this offer. Nampo Vasco was born in 2883 in the city of New Junction on Lo in the Corel system. From a young age, he lived on the edge of society, falling into a life of crime after his mother sold him to a Banu Suli to pay off her gambling debts. This Suli was a chop shop, specializing in stripping stolen ships and selling the parts. So the young man went to work, learning the inside and out of every ship the Suli ever acquired. It was this time with the Banu that made him an impressive mechanic and engineer that he would become. But the ship that made him fall in love with ships was the 2884 Cutlass Black. Even after paying off his debts to the Banu, he would return to work with them, becoming an expert in modifying ships, especially smuggler ships. While a lot of his early designs for scan-proof smuggling compartments failed, he eventually earned a reputation for these custom jobs, one that would lead to his arrest by the Advocacy in 2904 in a sting operation. During his time in jail, his boisterous and affable nature allowed him to avoid the gangs that ran the prison. It was this and his jet black hair that earned him the nickname Cousin Crow. Once he was released, he used his connections from prison to slowly work his way into a legitimate business, repairing and eventually modifying ships through his own customs shop. His reputation grew as his skills were well recognized, and slowly his shop became known for being both a safe haven and a good place to look for work for ex-cons who wanted to start on the straight and narrow after prison. Cousin Crow's big break came in 2942, after partnering with a luxury tour line company to modify an old Genesis Starliner into the ultimate party ship. A massive marketing campaign saturated Spectrum with images of the Starliner, and the famous tagline, "So much fun, it should be illegal." This made Cousin Crow's a name in the ship conversion circles across the Empire. Not long after, Drake executives invited him to visit their headquarters on Magnus. There, they showed Cousin Crow their plans for their first capital ship, and offered him a chance to make an exclusive livery for the launch. Cousin Crow countered with an even bolder idea. Over the years, many of his clients had hired him to convert their ships' holds into Banu-like marketplaces. Rather than have to do it in an aftermarket retrofit, how much better would it be if he could work with Drake directly? The executives loved the idea, and soon the Kraken privateer was born. Being a Drake superfan, Cousin Crow took to the task like a seasoned professional, and chose one of the cargo bays for his conversion. His experience and love for Drake making it easy to match the iconic Drake styling, while adding the functionality of the Banu marketplaces he knew so well from his time in the Suli. In the end, he created a fusion of Banu market sensibilities with Drake's rugged and people-first design language. It was clear that Andon Arden's desire to push the brand forward and away from the mistakes of the past mirrored the checkered past of Cousin Crow, hoping that the public would see their move to have a reformed criminal helping them create their most ambitious project to date reflect on their own attempt to rehabilitate the brand away from the outlaw to the common man. However, Drake rebrand didn't stop there. They had their sights set on their old nemesis, the UE Navy. For years, due to their reputation, Drake had been pushed out of any and all Invictus ship show celebrations. The reasons were that Drake didn't have any ships in the Navy, despite both Cutlass Reds and Vultures being used by the Navy in non-combat roles, and other non-combat and support ship manufacturers being welcomed into these ship show celebrations. So in 2950, Drake decided to form their own convention, taking place nearby an Invictus celebration in the Stanton system at the end of the official celebrations of the Navy, calling it Drake DefenseCon. The goal of the DefenseCon can be summed up by its tagline, something to the effect of, "When the fleet moves on, who will be there to defend you?" The convention was part showcase and part marketing stunt to help them align themselves with the common person of the UEE. They were taking advantage of this strained relationship with the Navy, who had drastically scaled back their efforts to keep the peace outside of the frontier with the Vandal War, and placing themselves as the answer to the fears of a rise in crime all over the UEE. This was most notably seen in the Stanton system itself, with the Jumptown Wars, the Siege of Orison, and the Xenothreat incursions. Andon Arden wasn't quite done yet, though. It was at this first DefenseCon that he unveiled a new ship to the verse, the Corsair, and a new market for Drake to plant its flag in: exploration. Coming at a length of 53 meters, a width of 30 meters, and a height of 25 meters, the Corsair was roughly the same size as the RSI Constellation series, being a direct competitor to its Aquila line. However, the ship would absolutely smash its competition in the most Drake way possible: price and firepower. Sporting 4 fixed size 5 weapon hardpoints, 2 fixed size 4 weapon hardpoints, 2 manned and 1 remote twin size 2 turrets, and 4 size 4 missile hardpoints, the Corsair was more well-armed than just about every exploration ship on the market. It pairs this firepower with luxurious accommodations for the captain and crew, as well as a generous large cargo bay able to support a vehicle or 72 SCU of cargo. It also has a dedicated airlock room with suit and weapon storage to allow for any kind of EVA requirements. Drake didn't stop with just one new market, though, following the Corsair release a year later in 2951, with another version of the Cutlass, this being a dropship for the people. The Drake Cutlass Steel installed more guns, specifically door guns and a rear-mounted turret, along with 18 jump seats for armed and armored passengers. While early versions of the ship were criticized for being under-armored and slow compared to their counterparts, later corrections would see Drake win some acclaim back amongst dropship pilots. And in Arden's Drake was firing on all cylinders from here on, releasing yet another new vehicle to the market in 2952, the Mule. The Mule is a six-wheeled dependable workhorse for all sorts of loading and hauling jobs. Being able to be operated by a single driver, it has a forklift capable of lifting one SCU box and loading it onto a ship, along with transporting 6 smaller crates and items. Its compact design means it can fit in ships as small as the Cutter, and its all-terrain wheels allow it to traverse over the toughest the verse can throw at it. Drake had made a frontier forklift, and once again was defying convention. Speaking of the Cutter, the next move by the Arden-led Drake was to revive the line, creating 2 new variants, the Rambler and the Scout. The Rambler was designed with durability, adaptability, and ease of use as its core principles. The ship is equipped with essential features such as additional fuel tank, a food maker, storage for armor, and ample cargo space. The Scout enhances the Cutter's combat and utility capabilities through the incorporation of an upgraded weapons and scanning components, its main draw being its supercharged radar capabilities, likely thanks to the team who created the Navi 7. These new variants corresponded with an update and overhaul of the main Cutter as well, which has catapulted the ship into being one of the most popular introductory ships in the UEE, leading to a massive sales increase by the manufacturer. This explosion of innovation and productivity wasn't done yet, though. As of this year, 2954, they've announced yet another new ship to help fill out the Drake family of ships, the super hauler called the Ironclad. Coming in at 120 meters long, 52 meters wide, and 20 meters tall, the Ironclad is best described as a large cargo bay with engines. An expansive cargo bay takes up the majority of the ship's interior, capable of holding 1,536 SCU. It also comes standard with both a main ramp and retracting roof for inserting cargo from the outside and protecting it on the inside, a smaller cargo area that can store valuable or dangerous cargo, and a spacious garage in the back that allows for a variety of vehicles. To make its job easier, the base Ironclad also comes equipped with 3 size 2 tractor beams, able to load exterior cargo through its roof. It comes standard with a command module that can be detached from the main hull and used as an independent ship, and serves as the ship's escape pod. It boasts thick armor and array of weapons, from 4 size 4 missile racks, a size 5 and a size 3 manned turret, 2 size 3 remote turrets, and even a size 2 interior remote turret for defense against boarders. Additionally, Drake announced a separate version of the Ironclad called the Assault. The main difference with the Assault compared to the base was the addition of 2 new size 3 quad remote turrets, an assault ramp, rearm and refuel garage, 34 jump seats, and a component fabrication device. This was at the cost of the tractor beams and almost 400 SCU of cargo space. Drake is a polarizing company, with many either loving them or hating them for a variety of reasons. No matter what, it is clear by now that this once scrappy, rebellious outlaw manufacturer is here to stay. Beloved by many as true champion of the everyman, while also managing to secure a maximum amount of profits along the way. This duality of Drake Interplanetary is likely going to continue, being both a profit-chasing, cynical corporation and a company that seeks to give power to the people. I'd like to thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, think about hitting that like button, subscribing for more content, and hitting the bell icon to be notified when these release. These take a ton of time to research and edit, so dropping a like really helps tell YouTube to promote the video more to other fans of lore content and Star Citizen. Drake is one of my favorite manufacturers in the verse. I love their simple but rugged style, which skews towards practicality. Their often murky reputation makes for an enticing anti-hero for the verse, and I love me a good dubious hero in a story. Adding to this, Drake was the first manufacturer that I think the developers managed to successfully mesh the company's lore with the ship's design, as I'm certain that anyone can identify what kind of manufacturer Drake is at a glance of their ships. 2 more small things I wanted to add about the lore of Drake, which I couldn't find a way to put into the video without breaking the flow. The first being a lost lore ship mentioned in the consolidated Outland portfolio of all places, a prototype Drake ship called the Lobster, which Silas Kerner has in his private collection. I'd really like to see or hear what this mysterious Drake Lobster was at some point. Secondly, there's a saying in the lore, which once I mention it, you'll likely not be able to unsee it, that goes, every ship Drake makes is just a different version of the Cutlass. For instance, the Caterpillar is just the Cutlass Long, the Buccaneer is the Cutlass Combat, and the Cutter is the Cutlass Light, and so on. This is important because Drake will randomly show up in other stories in the verse, applying for a military contract, only for their submission to be rejected for being just another Cutlass by the Navy. Just some neat little side things about Drake. I'd also like to thank those on screen now for supporting the channel financially. If you want to throw in a few credits, think about becoming a member on YouTube. And if you want a bit more for your contributions, join the Ko-fi or Patreon. Patreons and Ko-fi members get early, ad-free access to all videos, including exclusive early access to my long-running Complete History of Star Citizen lore series. Check those out now in the top right if you want to know more about what you're getting. Now, I want to hear your thoughts on this and any other lore topics in the comments below. And as always, remember, ex Historia ad Astra.